wants to do Doris Day?
I got.
Oh, okay, good.
So, this suit revolves around what a retail pet store is, and it's under the Animal Welfare Act, which regulates, sets standards, and sets up inspections for dog breeders, people that sell dogs. The biggest issue is that like retail pet stores, which I take to be like a pet store in the mall, or like, I don't know, not like PetSmart. I don't think they sell pets, but like those big chains you think of that sell pets, they are not subject to this part of the Animal Welfare Act that seeks to ensure humane treatment for dogs and other animals raised and sold wholesale for research. And what ended up happening was...
Why do you think it would exempt retail pet stores from licensing?
They probably had good lobbyists, or they're probably good lobbyists, or there's probably more money there. So you think that the whole purpose of the law is to not regulate like the people that have the farm upstate that breed dogs, but these like whoever mass-produced big businesses that want to churn out dogs as cheap as they can. So let's see. The court held that. Let's see. The secretary had the power to make the language of this law, and that it wasn't necessary to keep. Oh, yeah, they kind of the cop-out was said that retail outlets are not unregulated. They kind of left it up for other bodies like the zoning laws and I guess like the mall cops to regulate these pet stores. And it denied. Let's see, denied the granted summary judgment to the pet store.
Do you agree?
No.
Why?
It's bad. I think this is that the whole point of the animal law, with the Animal Welfare Act, as it pertains to the selling and distribution of pets, was to stop these Walmart pet stores from doing whatever they want and putting dogs in tiny cages. And that's what I think. Well, I guess from the Animal Rights Act at this point, that's what the law is intended to stop, not the breeders on the farms and small-scale breeders that don't have like a storefront and a cash register. So that's what it kind of separated as, like the people that just kind of sell it, and it's like word of mouth, or maybe like a website that they sell the dogs on, and the stores that have like pet store, big sign out front.
But if breeders were not considered retail pet store, then they would be subject to the act.
Yeah, but I guess my issue is that the law or the statute or the language of the statute should seek to put restrictions on and put in check the pet stores, not these breeders.
Right.
But I could be wrong that these breeders do horrible things to the dogs. But I guess when you think of like a breeder, you think of like a better situation for the dogs, whatever they are, the animals, not the pet store where the dogs like in the window when you walk by in the mall. There's like 9 puppies in the whole thing.
So we see here yet another deference to Congress, where the USDA and the court doesn't want to get involved in interpreting the statute or overruling the exception. It basically says, hey, Congress knows how to write. If it wanted to include pet stores in this, it certainly could have. Do you think it's appropriate here?
Well, I think, part of the standard is the Secretary of Agriculture's regulation patently unreasonable, right? Because Congress said in their infinite wisdom that the Secretary of Agriculture can go ahead and make these regulations, and so long as they aren't, if they aren't in error, then we're not going to disturb what the legislature said. And you see that, and that's everywhere. That's not just an animal law. That's in all kinds of law, where it says, if this is unreasonable, then we can't let it stand. But if there's any sort of a rational basis, everything is sort of rational basis, it seems. Get the use, right? Sorry. It seems like, so long as it's not an unreasonable regulation, and they use the rationale was in here. The Secretary said, listen, we only have the resources to go after certain people. So if we can knock out the largest breeders that are, in violation of these statutes, and we regulate them, then we're putting more animals in a better position than they were. Of course, the other half of that argument is that you're also letting a large group of animals that are subject now to inhumane treatment to continue to be subject to that. And so, maybe it's a cop-out to say, well, we can only do the large ones, and so therefore the small ones have to go, unpunished or unregulated, and so instead of looking for more money or trying to find different ways to enforce the laws, they just said, well, we can only do this, so that's all we're going to do. So,
Except that the breeders, what's considered breeders, I don't think they're looking at the, backyard breeders where we have a litter of puppies and sell them. I think we're looking at the puppy mills, Pennsylvania, Oklahoma.
there was what was there? It was like,
And they're exempt.
it was like $500 income, wasn't it? I mean, there was some income level that they derived from it. At least I'm remembering there was some income level.
$400 or something.
Any person who does not have a machine purchase sale who derives only $500 gross income.
Right, so I thought that was sort of the piece that they put in as sort of the catch-all to find anyone who is, but of course I guess you have to find that person first and then prove how much money they're spending, and so it's almost seemed like it's overly burdensome for them to actually enforce the spirit of that regulation. So I guess actually now that I'm talking it out, then it doesn't make any sense, because they made a regulation that was so difficult for them to enforce that it's almost like there isn't a regulation at all.
I don't understand what the exemptions are for, unless, as Fred said, good lobbyists.
It's interesting, on page 553, they talk about puppy mills, and it was a way, did you see that? After World War II, raising of dogs as crops, as an alternative means for farmers to make money. That's how puppy mills started. I didn't know that. And look what happened, huh?
I mean, we're going to say it's puppy mills that sell the dogs to pet stores.
Yep.
So, I guess that makes sense, right? So if they're going to regulate, well, I guess it only goes
They're all
halfway.
exempt.
Oh, okay, then never mind.
This court found that retail pet store includes breeders.
I didn't read that.
At first you don't think it does, and then you go back and you go, oh, yeah. Because you think it would.
So where does it stop? It stops at the $500? The person that gets less than $500 gross income per transaction?
Right.
So it means they'd have to go and find every single breeder individually and challenge every single, it would never happen. It's not enforceable.
Plus now, how much are purebred puppies now? One puppy is what, 1,500, 600 to whatever.
And that's not even where the abuse and the inhumane treatment is.
Right.
So if you wanted to sue, so they're just suing on the fact that the law is not like what's like, what I'm trying to say, what's...
I mean, are they standing? Or...
Yeah, I don't think really got it. I'm not sure. But I guess if you wanted to sue a breeder that was exempt, or if you thought someone was like borderline, or they could be considered a breeder, if it was like a puppy mill, you want to challenge it, you want to sue them under this statute.
What are you suing them for?
I don't know, I guess nothing, right? You can't.
Yeah, abuse falls on a criminal.
If you were like a small breeder and you wanted to sue a puppy mill for like I don't know, in England, an antitrust suit against like, I don't know.
Well, in California, you might be able to claim a right of public policy. Right? I mean, some of the cases are in California where it's against public policy for inhumane treatment of animals, and so therefore they're standing by an individual person to, but it'd have to be against a single puppy mill, right? It wouldn't have to be, it couldn't be against the person that's writing the regulations. You'd have to go and find the puppy mill and then say, because it's against public policy to allow such treatment of animals, and that.
Then we'll say we're exempt, right? So they can do it. They can say, well,
I don't know. I'm just trying to like read into what we read about the California stuff, where it's like it's a matter of public policy. That the Lion case where they said, that the humane treatment of animals is a matter of public policy, and so therefore, it gives a person standing to challenge the practices of that particular organization. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know if it sticks or not.
that didn't help the line. I was wait to that.
What's that?
I'll wait until we get to that case.
Okay.
How'd you like it?
No more comments on this one. We'll have to go there now.
That wasn't.
How'd you have it?
Is that Kate?
Can I do this one?
Sure.
Okay. On page 535. Hagen v. Feld Entertainment Incorporated, also known as, what does DBA stand for again?
Does business as.
Business as.
Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. Hagen is a resident of Virginia and is the plaintiff. Feld Entertainment is the defendant and is a business with its principal place of business in Virginia. Hagen was hired in 1993 by Feld to work for Ringling Brothers and worked until 2000, and then he was terminated in 2004. Hagen was a lion handler, and this case is a wrongful termination case. On a very hot day, while a train of lions were traveling through the Mojave Desert in California, Hagen was asked the train to stop. He had told management that the animals hadn't gotten the water they needed and whatever in many, many hours. And I think that it was like over 100 degrees or something going through the desert. And by the time the train actually did stop, which was like 7 hours later since like the last time he had watered and checked on the lions, he found one of the lions like very unresponsive, and by the time he like helped him, he died. Ringling Brothers management told Hagen to move the lion to the meat truck and to not say anything to anyone. The meat truck was then inspected by the USDA, and Feld's legal counsel questioned Hagen. He was told not to talk about the lion's death, but he did. And then he was threatened with termination, and he was terminated. And he claims a wrongful discharge based on the fact that he told management of violation of the Animal Welfare Act for humane and care treatment of the lions as they were transported. And the court found for Hagen.
Do you agree?
Oh, yeah.
Why?
Well, I mean, those kind of conditions, I mean, animals have to be, it was really, really, really hot. And under the act, it says live animals are not to be subjected to surrounding air temperatures in excess of 85 degrees. Care must be taken to ensure that the animals do not suffer physical trauma. I mean, they weren't caring for them. And I mean, their priority, I think they said like they wouldn't stop to water them because they were behind schedule. So, I mean, when you have animals that are main part of your business, certainly, you know, you would think they'd take priority in caring for them and not, you know.
And what was the cause of action in this case?
Wrongful termination.
Right. Had this been for...
It was like whistleblower. It was kind of a whistleblower case.
Exactly. Had he not been fired and he brought the action for the inhumane treatment, do you think he would have had standing?
Yes.
Why?
Well, he was so closely tied as an employee caring for, and I mean, his role was, I think it said lion handler, yeah. So, he wasn't, you know, so far removed from it. I mean, he was.
Are there any cases you can cite to support that?
We had the case with the turned Jovi or whatever, remember? First he had
Exactly,
standing and then they took it away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
With the birds, he used to visit the aviary of part of the zoo, and he complained because the birds didn't have swings and all of that.
Oh,
So
yeah.
he found that he did have standing because he was personally injured. He had gone there quite a few times.
Right.
Right?
So if you have abuse and research issues, under the AWA, what's the best way to attack that? Is it legislation or is it litigation?
Well, there was legislation in place, you know, and it was violated.
Well, I mean, you can challenge it under the administrative rules, where the cause of action created by a regulation made by a body that's been granted by the legislature, the administrative authority to grant a regulation. But those always seem to fail. You know, so every time you try and do that, it never works, and we're going to give deference to. So it almost has to be sort of a personal challenge or violation in litigation. mean, otherwise,
I'm seeing most of those are failing too.
yeah. I mean, I thought it was an important step here where they said, the Act clearly, the Animal Welfare Act clearly benefits society at large rather than the personal interest of the plaintiff. And the Act is designed to ensure the nation's animals' interstate commerce are treated in safe and in a humane manner. Society as a whole, rather than individual, such as the plaintiff, benefits from the humane handling of animals. So, when reading that, I would cite that along with Sierra Club to almost anybody that goes to the zoo or goes to, Ringling Brothers. I have an aesthetic interest in this. I've participated in a certain way, and I intend to participate in the future, and I want to see these animals treated humanely. It seems like sort of the pieces are slowly but surely being put in place to challenge some of this stuff, if the court has the guts to allow it.
Is there a separate suit, like from this this whole situation against the circus? Because this is just, when this guy won, he got money in his pocket for his wrongful. So were they prosecuted, or was there a charge against for them for violating the act? Is that not illegal?
I don't think so, but I don't know.
Because shouldn't it be? Was it not illegal to violate the act? Was that like the big issue here, like for like animal rights? It's great. Like Pat said that the court supports this statute, this language in the statute, and says that's good. But at the same time, like, the line's dead.
Right.
Because of overwork and...
Well, he did speak up, so, he was talking to the USDA, which is what got him terminated in the first place.
Should the USDA now
I would think they
do something against...
On notice.
We just don't know, right?
Yeah, we don't even know if he won or not. Did he?
Oh, yeah, right.
This was just... Yeah, this was a motion to dismiss.
Yeah.
These were the facts.
Because they were trying to say it was preempted by like 301, and they said basically that it wasn't because it wasn't a matter of the collective bargaining agreement. If they had to use that bargaining agreement, then it could have been preempted. But since they didn't have to use it, they could just use the state law. So he won on that, and then intentional infliction of emotional distress. So they denied that motion.
So wouldn't that mean he wouldn't have standing if he was suing otherwise?
That's funny that the collective bargaining agreement would preempt any animal cruelty.
Right.
Right? So if he was part of a bargaining unit.
They would have, because they would.
Right.
The federal law would have preempted it, and
Right.
it would have gone. Yeah.
That's interesting.
No, Fred, I think he would have had standing because of his position.
Yeah. He was.
They're saying that he can't satisfy the claim for the intentional emotional distress, right? Because his standing is going to be that he has such a close tie to this animal and he was so affected by the mistreatment of it.
Right.
So I don't know. Wouldn't it make sense that the circuit to satisfy standing would be greater than to satisfy intentional?
No, because you can have an injury without it being intent.
Oh, okay.
You just need an injury that's caused and redressable.
And if I was the other side, I would argue, if you're trying to argue the intentional infliction of emotional distress, I would say there's no property interest here. You didn't own the animal.
Right.
The circus owned the animal.
Yeah. True.
You were just a caretaker. You were paid by the company.
Yeah.
Not that I agree with it, but that's. The guy spent 14 hours a day hanging out with these lions. Obviously he had a connection to them.
Plus, as we saw earlier in the tort section, he gave extreme and outrageous conduct and malice.
Well, I believe they said there was some extreme and outrageous because they made him move the lion to the meat thing, but there was something else that didn't let it get to that point.
That's interesting, actually. Having him move the lion to the meat wagon.
And they told him to get lost when the USDA comes. So the USDA,
Right.
so he couldn't talk to them.
Clean it out and then wash it down so there's no
That's right.
fur in there and stuff.
Right.
Just like that other case we read when he had to do things that was some traumatic. I forget what case it was. Was either
Horse case, like a horse contract.
it was someone who trained something, and it's a similar situation where they were with something all the time, and something ended up happening, and they made him do something, or
Elephants.
Yeah.
maybe it was the dog with the
Elephant.
people next door too. They killed the dog and got rid of it, and that was extreme and outrageous.
What's funny? This case is 2005, so there was some precedent that he probably could have challenged some of the more, the cruelty to animals pieces. I'm wondering if his sole purpose was to get paid off for being terminated, and that there was no other.
Or it's all what we put in.
Right.
Yeah.
We
Right.
don't know
Or it's all
what was
what?
edited out.
Right.
We don't know what was edited out of the case in the book. Maybe he did that and failed on those counts. The only one that prevailed was the
Was this one?
discharge.
Can I ask a question about the Animal Welfare Act?
Sure.
Does that leave it to the several secretaries of agriculture in the states to decide what the individual regulations are? It seems like they're granted a lot of latitude.
It does, doesn't it?
Right, I mean, it's so the act was put in place, and the act was for the humane treatment of animals. But then pretty much every executive branch of every state can just pretty much do whatever they want, and the courts in that state are going to side with whoever the particular secretary happens to be because it's in their interest to do so, and it's easier, and they'll take some of these challenges up. I mean, I wonder if this wasn't it seems like it's a great law on its face, but in application, it seems like there's not a whole lot of teeth to it.
Well, they're on the animals after all, right? That's how they look at it, right? They're only bunnies and dogs.
So cloning, we started talking about this in the last class. Before I ask questions, does anybody have any general thoughts about what you read?
It wasn't geared towards like the protection of animals. Like every real roadblock people put up against cloning and whatever else. That's what research. It's like they use the slippery slope argument. Like, well, if you allow people to do that on sheep, eventually it's going to happen to people. So it's really people are worried about that side of it, not so much the animal rights, but the other argument.
Yeah, that was I took away too. That the animal welfare is really sort of a second seat to, concerns over. I mean, I was sort of picking out religious undercurrents in it too. You know what I mean? Where there's lots of challenges to.
Because they playing God, people don't like that.
Right.
With animals, it's okay, but the people, it's definitely not.
When it gets too close to people, that's when it gets ugly.
Yeah.
Well, plus, what about the green cat, the sparkling cat
Oh, yeah, the
glow in the
glow-in-the-dark.
dark? I mean, where does it stop if you let them,
As of 2009, that's I guess the most recent it has, there's no federal ban on human cloning. Why do you think that is?
We're not there yet either.
And we're not yet. Exactly. We're not there, and I think that nobody wants to be the risk taker to do it yet, because there are going to be so many legal implications that we're so removed from that right now. I think.
Plus, look at all the controversy even over stem cell.
Yeah, they stopped steps 1, 2, and 3. So if that's step
That's right.
100, you don't need to stop that yet because we're so far away. It's a non-issue.
Well, I don't think it's a non-issue
yet.
Yeah, it's not even on anybody's radar. In a practical sense.
Yeah.
I guess maybe I don't know.
But I think that has to be a big part of it. I mean, why is Congress going to? I mean, they can't even get a budget passed right now, right? So I mean, why are they going to take up? Why are they going to take up something that's not even, legitimately on the horizon for another 15 or 20 years? Maybe it's right now. It's a battle not worth fighting to them, which is possible.
But do you think there would be a fight?
For human cloning?
Yeah.
I think it'd be a pretty big fight.
Really?
Yeah, I do because I think that there's lots of stuff that happens now, right? So you have different ways that human cells are used to grow new organs, right? So there's new technology now where you can create an esophagus or a heart by taking an existing. They only did it in rats now, but you wash the cells out of it and it leaves the cartilage structure underlying, and then they populate it with cells from a different animal and it grows a new heart, right? So is that cloning, or is that more like what do they call it here?
Farming?
It's more of the exotransplantation.
That's it. That's exactly right. Xenotransplantation. Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. So I mean, I don't think anyone's worried about that being cloning, even though technically it's cloning of cells. It's cloning of human cells, right? And I think that Congress will address it when it becomes the cloning of a human being, and that's when I think when that's a reality, when it's more than just a heart or a liver or an esophagus. It's going to, or actually it's not even liver yet, more than a heart or an esophagus. That's when the explosion is going to happen, I think.
How about the woman who paid $50,000 to have her cat cloned? How about that? And the book says it seems frivolous because tens of millions of animals are killed in shelters each year.
She likes that kind of.
She liked it, yeah.
That must have been one heck of a cat.
Must have been pretty talented. Huh?
Yeah.
Must have been.
So how would we define a being that has both animal and human DNA?
Oh yeah, I saw that.
A transgenic being.
And how do you define it legally?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, at what point does it stop being does it stop being more like an animal and start being more like a human? I mean, we don't know where that line is yet, right? So you get a mouse and you put a cancer gene into it, so it develops cancer, so you can experiment on it, right? So as of today, that's not so human that it's impermissible. But who's to say? I mean, and from a lot of the stuff that we're reading, I mean, it seems to be like once it starts to take on a physical characteristic of a human is when people are going to start to get sort of nervous about it. And it doesn't matter if a ostrich has a human heart growing in it, no one's going to freak out about that. But as soon as the ostrich has hands, people are going to start to lose their minds. Or at least that's what I'm taking away from some of the stuff that we've been reading.
So you think when it starts to look like a person, that's when it might be legally defined as a person?
I mean, that's when it's a lot of the animal law that we've been reading. I mean, that sort of seems to be the tipping point, right? Where it's something that, the animal's welfare or the intentional infliction of emotional distress, becomes real when it's inflicted on an animal when it has a human impact, right? Or a companion animal, they talk about granting those companion animals more rights because of the human impact they have on the humans who take care of them, right? So why wouldn't it make sense to translate for a transgenic animal that it starts becoming something that people worry about when it starts having visibly human characteristics, So long as it's internal, people are less concerned about it. But as soon as it becomes external, then everybody freaks out. Even though, as a practical matter, there's no difference in effect. I mean, if it's an ostrich with a human heart, it's an ostrich with a human heart. I mean, that's still, substantially it. Yeah, exactly.
I think they could do like that. That makes a lot of sense. Like when it starts becoming more human-like, we'll start being very worried about it. But also, could look at it like as dropping. I think of human animals. Then even below that would be these like what do we call them? Transgenic animals, because these things are just like abominations. They're like monsters, like created. So they don't have rights or anything. So wouldn't that even be below like an actual animal, like this like petri dish animal that we created? Like, like well, we kind of mix things together, and now we got this. So if it didn't work, just kind of like scrap that and try it again.
Kind of like Frankenstein.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Isn't that kind of what we're talking about? So wouldn't that have less of a right than an actual, I don't know, an animal that occurs naturally? I think.
Well, I see what you're saying, but if it looks like an animal and acts like an animal, how would an outsider know the difference?
Like I said, well, I mean, these things only exist in like labs, right? Unless I'm wrong, I don't think that they're.
Well, they have. I mean, you must have seen the video of the mice with human ears growing in the back. Yeah.
Those aren't like free range. They're not like out in the plains or in like people's apartments. They're just like in the labs. So I think that, especially in labs, if people create these things, they can just destroy them and do whatever they want with them, right? I mean, if they're already there and we're growing ears on them, why should we care if they die? Because we're just kind of, I don't know, we're just taking crap. We're just doing it. Yeah.
That's an interesting point, actually. At what point may the government decide that if it has certain qualities, that it has to die within a certain amount of time? So saying that we have to
create those qualities. That,
right?
Aren't we the master of these things now?
Right.
I don't know if we're creating them. Are they really animals? If we're just kind of creating them out of whatever things we got laying around?
The court seems to say no.
Yeah, right.
If we are manipulating them such that they're no longer natural, then if we can patent them. I mean, why couldn't we? If they're a property and they're patented, so no one else can make them, who's going to stop you from? Treating them as exclusive property and killing them at will, or doing whatever you want.
Except that if you go back to the very first night of class, we talked about what is an animal, the definitions. Wouldn't they fall under the definitions of an animal?
Yeah, but if we can create and clone and do all these things, we have to kind of like rethink of the way we define animals, right? Because that, it would fit under that definition of an animal, like a living thing with movement, however you describe it. I don't remember, but that wouldn't really apply.
Animal or
because like these new things now are being created after that definition, so you can't really go back and lump it in under that. I mean, you could, I guess, but I think you make an argument for like these didn't exist when we defined animals, so there's something else.
I mean, wouldn't the key to be to stop the cloning before it happens?
Ideally.
You know, I mean, because there's, I mean, we know that cloned animals have, developmental problems and shorter lifespans.
Yeah, it's like 95%.
Yeah.
Animals
Have
used
some sort
to
of-
do the cloning suffer pain.
Right. Yeah, they can't give live birth, or I mean, there's lots of little
Yeah, they said there's
pieces
a lot of
to it.
problems with the birth and stuff. I just looked at it real quick.
Right. Yeah, they age exceptionally fast.
One of them said like they have fluid problems. There's like
Deformities.
large something syndrome where they abnormally sized.
Oh,
and
fun for everything.
that also causes problems with the labor.
Is it possible to treat an animal humanely if you're using it for cloning purposes and it's being treated more like a machine?
Can something be treated humane if it's created by an inhumane process? Right? I mean, it's, what's
Are you
cruel?
talking about the cloned animal now?
Right. So I mean, can a cloned animal be treated in a humane manner even though it arrived as a result of an inhumane process?
My question is the animal that's used to do.
The parenting, the parents,
Well,
right?
couldn't we be getting there? Like, I mean, it's like the early stages of cloning. Like, we're still figuring it out. But like, eventually, like in the beginning, it's going to be a little tough, a little rough for these animals. But they're like the monkeys we shot into space. Like, they're kind of serving the greater good. So eventually, we kind of perfect this cloning, and we can figure out how to do it humanely.
What greater good are they serving?
I mean, I'm sure.
Science.
Yeah, science. I mean, I'm sure we're cloning things for a reason. I'm sure they help humans. Or I mean, I think it's kind of cool. I don't know, for whatever that's worth.
Well, I have a question. So prior to the cloning section, there was the patent section. So we start once clones start to become more frequent, are we going to start patenting these cloned animals?
We talked about that, right?
The process of it.
Yeah. About the woman who processed, got a patent on it.
Dolly?
Algae, remember the algae?
Oh, yeah.
Algae or something?
But that's more like a thing than it is like an animal.
Well, yeah,
That's
absolutely.
like a pretty sweet invention, and that's like
Yeah. No,
I
yeah.
have no problem with that.
And,
But I wonder how it would be regulated.
It promotes testing on animals, right? So that's why there are groups that are opposing the patents. Because otherwise, if you have this patent that makes it legal and justifiable to use animals to test, then it's going to discourage groups from finding alternative reasons, alternative ways to test.
I see that.
I mean, the court seemed to struggle less with the creation of an animal that had wholly different characteristics than something that existed in the natural world, right? So in that algae one, the oil-eating algae, they're like, nothing eats oil. Like, you created this, you modified it, so it's no longer natural. So we're okay with giving you a patent on that. And then it gets kind of sticky, right? Exactly.
I think the oil especially.
Right. And then, the oysters that are edible year-round, now it's stickier because now it's an oyster. It just happens to be an oyster that's a little bit different than the rest of the oysters. You know what I mean?
They didn't allow that, right?
They didn't allow that, yeah.
I think that's less compelling that like people, the oyster industry can make more money, or people can eat more oysters.
Right.
Or like with the oil, it's like this will help the environment, help the ecosystem, and be good for oil spills and that all the time.
Right. So,
That's good, right?
but then the question becomes, so, a chicken with 12 legs doesn't occur in nature. What if someone figures out a way to create a chicken with 12 legs so they can...
Was that in here? Part of that? There's something about like genetic experiments for the food industry. It was like, sorry,
I don't recall it, but...
Probably.
But, a chicken with 12 legs doesn't occur in nature. It could be potentially very, very profitable, So why couldn't you patent that and create something? I mean, to me, that's an abomination. I mean, you're creating something that can't walk, it can't move, it can't, you're creating life that
Yeah, like I
can't.
have right here. It says research aimed at producing, as my computer goes, producing medicines in the milk of such animals such as like sheep and cows. It says that they produce, for instance, the blood-clotting agent IX to treat hemophilia and alpha-1, which is kind of weird that you can, when they clone, can actually get medicine into the milk. Like, that's definitely something that, like you said, to put something out there that's not there.
Yeah, creating something that creates clotting factor in its milk. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
It's pretty cool.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I mean, how?
Don't want to drink too much.
What impact does it have on that animal? You know?
Exactly.
What about all the antibiotics? I still think about all the antibiotics they put in chickens. I mean, I'm a vegetarian anyway, but if I weren't,
What would they put into?
But that's very disturbing. Yeah.
It is
It's very disturbing, yeah.
I'd rather not know.
We can buy organic
Right.
right.
Why do they do that?
because it makes them
Bigger?
faster, yeah, bigger.
Stay healthier.
Faster turnover. It's all profit.
It's all worth Benjamins.
I mean, if you could create like a farm, that type of like animal farming, if you could create a farm that like produced these chickens that had 12 legs, and it was very cheap, and there was where you could like sedate the chickens so they weren't like in extreme agony, and then you slaughter them, and like you solve like the food shortage crisis, and food's cheaper and more accessible to everybody.
That is justified.
Wouldn't that be an okay thing? Wouldn't that be like a
Well, but think about it,
process?
right? So if they said in one of these cases that they created this oil bacteria and it was something wholly different than what exists in nature, eight-legged chicken would be wholly different what exists in nature. Therefore, it wouldn't be an animal. Therefore, they'd have no duty to treat it in any humane manner whatsoever, right? I mean,
Yeah, but even birds now, we don't really have to treat birds humanely, right? Or we do, but there's less of a
Supposed to.
yeah, there's less of a burden on people. I mean, I guess like even in like the mass-produced bird farms where they kill the bird, that's not like all that great to begin with. So wouldn't that?
battery cages and
Yeah. So I mean, if you had the bird with 12 legs, you just had to get to that standard of humaneness. That wouldn't be that hard.
or like what's humane for a bird with 12 legs as opposed to
I'd say the
what's
same with a bird with 2 legs, which still isn't that humane. So it's probably readily
right,
achievable
right,
for
right,
us to do.
right.
So getting back to your original question, do we think that the parent of a clone could be treated humanely? Why couldn't they?
Is it possible to treat the parent of a cloned animal, correct, humanely?
Well, it
When
depends.
the very process of cloning causes pain and suffering to the animal.
Well, if the cloning doesn't need the animal's body, you know, if it all occurred in a lab, so the animal's grown, the parent, the donor, I suppose, if the donor isn't required for the growing of the new animal, then maybe. I mean, there's still, issues with having a.
If it's not required for the cloning of the new animal, then it would be a parent.
No, it would be. That's why I said it would be the donor, you know, the material donor, because they take whatever cells they take to clone that. So they have an animal, they draw blood, they from that blood for whatever reason find a way to be able to clone it, right? They grow a new animal in a laboratory setting. In that case, I guess maybe you could say that that animal was cheaper, but now there's been a duplicate of that animal made, which is a whole other question of what's humane and is that reasonable and cruel or not.
Do you mean psychologically the animal's humane? Like the fact that they are being cloned like that? Like if you
No,
could, so
I
you
meant
could do it.
physically.
Like, okay, so yeah, if you could do what Pat says, then cloning would be okay, right?
So how does
Because
cloning cause them pain? I guess I don't get that. So, you know what I'm saying?
How does it cause them pain?
Pain, yeah. I mean, I read the stuff, but
548. Cloning causes suffering in clone animals that don't
yeah.
Cloned animals whose organs are removed suffer. They have advanced aging, physical deformities. I guess that's what the cloned animals, right?
Yeah.
Well, think about it. If you take cells from an animal and you don't want the cells become polluted, so you put the genetic material back into the womb of the donor animal, and then it essentially grows a copy of itself.
Right here it says a high rate of late-term pregnancy loss, pregnancy complications, painful labor, and surgical intervention during the clone pregnancies.
That could just be like the learning curve too. You know what I mean? Like we're like getting better at it. So like, I mean, could be a little tough right now, but like modern medicine's great, but medicine 50 years ago was tough and people suffered then. So we're kind of like just getting there.
Do we know how Dolly is now?
I was just going to say we've come a long way from Dolly.
Is Dolly still alive?
I don't think so.
Dolly was
Died.
Like the first, was it a dog or a sheep?
Sheep.
the first.
Yeah, they think that cloned animals don't live that long because they inherit the telomeres of the donor animal. the telomeres are caps on your genes, and every time you replicate, the telomeres become smaller. So when you grab the genes, you're grabbing it with degraded telomeres, and so it has that many fewer replications before it stops working, and then so it's like causing further degradation. So it's almost like you can't grab something when it's 70 years old and clone it, because you're essentially cloning something with 70-year-old
Start at
telomeres.
70 going forward.
Right, exactly. So you're going to 75. You know. Well, I mean it'll look like a young animal, but it will have the genome of of an old animal.
Which also in a way could be good too for, potentially for transplantation for like older people someday.
Yeah.
Is that Kate?
Well, I mean, if you can do that, I don't know that much about cloning, but if you can do that, I think, say like an elderly person needs a transplantation or something someday, and you can do that to a sheep or make an clone an organ that would be useful to them and be the right age and match what they need.
You'll be happy to know that she's dead, but she's stuffed.
Of course she is.
Forever living on.
Of course she is.
Never,
So now she
never
can't be
gonna die.
cloned.
That's right.
Poor animal's just been abused from moment one.
And she's named after Dolly Parton, so you should know that.
Really?
Third level abuse.
It's British, right?
Yep.
Will animal rights ever be okay with cloning at all?
I don't think so.
She didn't live very long.
What
Dolly
are the advantages of
They're very short, very short-lived.
I don't know, if you can clone a heart and I need a new heart, give me a new heart. Great.
Well, that's the goal,
But
isn't
you
it?
don't want the heart of an infant.
No, yeah, but exactly. Like, I think we're starting with animals, which is where we start with medicine and science. So we're starting there, and we're trying to figure it out and get to and progress to a point where we can cure anything. So I think I understand people want humane treatment for animals, and great, but why should that come at stifling science and stifling progress? I don't know. I think we got competing interests here.
But we've already seen the harm in cloned animals.
Yeah, but you don't think we could ever, as a scientific race, move to the point where we can successfully clone healthy and happy animals?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either, but I think we definitely won't if we stop now. But maybe if we keep trying, and maybe we'll figure it out. It just I think it's bad that animals suffer, and we should do everything we can to make it done humanely as possible. But should we keep plugging away here and try to figure this thing out, or just stop altogether because these test subjects are suffering? I think that could. I don't think that's good. That's bad.
It's not just that they're suffering and there's not been any forward progress.
Yeah. How long have we been trying? I don't know. In my lifetime, right? At least. I don't know, 10 to 20 years, but I don't think we should stop all science because of hurting animals. As a human race, I think that's the wrong. I don't know. I think there's definitely competing interests, and they're both important. I think it's more important for the greater good of everything. It's going to help animals too, right? We can clone animals. We can get new hearts and kidneys and whatever tissue for dogs when they get sick. So it's for better. I don't know.
I don't see it going in that direction.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the ultimate goal is to be able to your point, recreate a human heart for someone who's dying, right? I think that's probably what the goal is, I would think, right? Or it might be a commercial goal because you have a certain cattle that, has, I don't even know what parts of the cattle you eat, has extra big butt or something. I don't know what the technical term of it is, but I mean, that's where I would see it. That's where I would see it going. There just seems to be a whole lot of ethical implications. Well, I guess ethical stuff because you can't use my personal ethics to define. I don't know. I know where I'm going. It's not easy. It's very tricky.
It's hard, man. That
I guess you do have to weigh the benefits, right?
If the main benefit, maybe that's lofty, but if the benefit is curing every disease ever for human beings, isn't that if we're going to balance them, isn't that pretty high that we can stop that potentially? Maybe. I know it's not a slam dunk, it's not a guarantee that if we keep doing this, it's going to work. But if we don't do it and we don't work at it, it's definitely not going to happen.
think that's a huge leap. I don't know if that's possible.
You went from the lowest to like the first.
I'm just saying, why couldn't we? I mean, if we fund the
Couple would
research,
be good.
I'm just saying, like, that's definitely the end game. That's why we're trying.
To gain, that's what it says right here. Just to gain some advantages to have medicines in these animals.
But I think the question is how much suffering happens between today.
But what is the extent that
Right.
you have to go to?
But if we get to that, if we get to my end, that every
In
disease.
our lifetime.
Well, absolutely not. But I'm just saying, if we get there, won't we look back and say, like, you know, those animals, that's tough what happened, but, you know, they did a good thing for us.
Overpopulation. I don't know, no trouble.
See, that's a, you know, well, if I say this, Brandon's going to tell me, yeah, but it's not a person, it's an animal. So
Who's going to say that?
You are, but I guess I can't say it.
When would I say that? Have I ever said anything like
Not
that?
gonna upset me.
I just,
You're coming from this side.
but I think that there's a lot of ends whose means can be justified when the means are no longer occurring. You know, I mean, there's a whole lot of things that are like that. You know, that now we got here. You know, it's great that we got here, and you know, look how great we did. We all pat one another on the back. But you know, for 50 years before we were born, these creatures suffered immeasurably because we had to get where we are today. I mean, that's the argument. So how do you do something in a manner? How do you advance science? How do you how do you find ways to create medical breakthroughs and do so in a way that doesn't unduly burden animals with pain and suffering, you know, in that process? I mean, at what point do we decide that, you know, that all life needs to be treated in a certain manner and just adopt those standards and decide that, you know, we can't do something that's not treating life in, you know, with the level of respect that it deserves? And I mean, isn't that the argument? I mean, that's...
I agree with you. I don't think the animal rights activists are ever going to be satisfied, ever, right? With cloning, even if it's done, you know, with they sedate the animals and they have great conditions. The fact that it's happening is still going to be wrong and bad, right?
Probably.
For at least some.
Yeah, for some, yeah.
So I guess that becomes the point, right? Where is the tipping point, right? So society as a whole is never going to say that animals should have the same rights as human beings. I don't think that we're even close to that. It's never going to happen, right? So we need to decide some sort of a tipping point where the animal's comfort is, you know, so burdened that it's no longer acceptable for the human psyche to continue to do that. We should find that tipping point, right? I mean, that seems to be where all this stuff is going. You know, where, you know, they seem to recognize that cattle need to be branded. Right, so cattle have to be branded. That's just as part of us being able to produce them, you know, in agriculture manner. Or even if it's not branded, it's having an RFID chip inserted under their skin or some sort of, you know, pay thing. But there's a certain utility to it, right? And I think that's because people recognize that, or people have an understanding that human life, right, is granted a higher status than animal life. But the question is what level of treatment exists between the human life and that animal life, and I don't know that there's an answer to it.
I guess maybe it has to do like the cattle case. That was a good case because they had a good argument because there were other less painful or restrictive ways to brand the cattle.
Right.
So that would be an issue too, whether there was clipping wings or whether there was less painful, less restrictive.
Right. Well, I mean, if you gave the cattle an anesthetic before you branded them, they wouldn't feel anything. Right, but you know, I don't know that the legislature is going to say, hey, listen, you're going to have to give every cattle $4 for the Novocaine before you can brand them.
Right.
You know, but maybe they should. You know, I mean, what level of, you know? So yes, so the marking is necessary. You know, I had back surgery 2 weeks ago, right? They wouldn't do that without giving me a local anesthetic. I mean, it's just not, you know what I mean? Like that's not even within the realm of possibility.
Unless you like pain.
Right. So.
You had back surgery 2 weeks ago when you're here, just sitting up.
He was at Animal Water.
You were here like the day after you had it, or the day you had it, the day after. How?
That's what I said. He's a machine.
And you wouldn't take any painkillers.
Advil, I took Advil.
I was just saying, you must have not been on painkillers, right?
Advil. Yeah, I can't take those anyway. I get
They give some
loopy. Oh yeah, I can't take like the what do they call them?
Good stuff.
Like I said,
Yeah, the narcotics.
Vicodin.
Yeah, I can't take any of those things.
they only take them at night. I mean, not
Relaxing on the couch, watch some TV.
Friday night, no big deal.
Some people have wine, I think Bert said.
Surgery a year ago, I took it for the first 2 nights, and that was good. And I wouldn't take it during the day either, because
Hey, it says Dolly gave birth to 4 lambs.
Progress.
how are those lambs doing now?
No, I was just looking to see
There's stuff next to her.
which Dolly's offspring.
All right, I always love the colony discussion.
Don't you think animal rights activists should move a little bit on this?